My brother seriously hurt my 10-year-old son's leg with a steel pipe, and my parents said he had it coming. So my brother used a construction-grade steel pipe to shatter my 9-year-old son's leg in front of 30 witnesses at a family barbecue. Before I explain how I made sure he'd spend the next decade behind bars, and how I took everything my parents owned, let me set the scene because this nightmare didn't start at that barbecue. It started way before that, buried under years of my family treating my brother like he could do no wrong. I'm Tyler Bennett, 34 years old. I'm a corporate litigation attorney at Henderson & Associates in Austin, Texas. That means I spend my days tearing apart bad contracts, deposing hostile witnesses, and making sure corporations don't screw each other over. It's high-stress work, long hours. But I'm good at it. Really good. I made partner at 31, which is basically unheard of at a firm like Henderson. I pull in close to $400,000 a year, I've got a nice house in the suburbs with a pool, and I've built a life I'm genuinely proud of. But none of that mattered to my family. None of it. Because I wasn't Brandon. And in my parents' eyes, nobody could ever be Brandon. I need you to understand the dynamic here because it explains everything that came after. From the time we were kids, Brandon was the chosen one. The golden child. The son who could do absolutely no wrong in my parents' eyes. He was 4 years older than me. And growing up, I watched him get away with everything while I got blamed for everything. When something went missing in the house, it was somehow my fault. When grades came home, his C- was excused because he was working so hard, while my A- meant I wasn't applying myself enough. I remember this one time when I was 12. I'd spent 3 months building this model ship for a school project. It was this intricate replica of an 18th century frigate, and I'd put in hours every night after homework getting every detail right. The night before it was due, Brandon came home late, stumbled into my room, and knocked it off my desk. Destroyed. Just completely demolished. I was crying, trying to salvage pieces. And when I told my parents what happened, my dad just shrugged and said, "Accidents happen, Tyler. Brandon didn't mean it. Maybe you should have kept your things in a safer place." Brandon never even apologized, just laughed about it the next day at breakfast while I tried to glue together what was left of 3 months of work. That was the pattern. Brandon did whatever he wanted, and I had to deal with the consequences of his actions, somehow being my responsibility. Brandon is my older brother, 38 when all this went down. He owned a roofing company called Bennett Brothers Roofing, which was ironic because I wasn't involved in it at all and never would be. The business was barely keeping afloat most months. I'd see the signs. Brandon always asking to borrow money. Brandon always complaining about cash flow. Brandon always one step ahead of bankruptcy. But in my parents' eyes, Brandon was this successful entrepreneur, this self-made business owner who was just going through rough patches that every small business goes through. The reality was that Brandon was a disaster waiting to happen. He had anger issues that everyone pretended didn't exist. I'm talking serious anger problems. The kind where he'd get into screaming matches at restaurants with waiters. The kind where he'd punch walls when things didn't go his way. The kind where his wife would call me sometimes, crying, saying he'd smashed something during an argument. But my parents never acknowledged it. "Oh, Brandon's just passionate," they'd say. "He feels things deeply." Brandon's under a lot of stress running a business. Brandon didn't mean it like that. They had an excuse for everything. Every single thing. Growing up, I was the responsible one. The one who actually tried. I did my homework every night, stayed out of trouble, didn't party in high school because I was too busy studying. I got into a decent college on academic scholarships, then law school. Also on scholarships because my parents spent all their money bailing Brandon out of whatever mess he'd gotten himself into that month. I graduated top of my class, passed the bar on the first try, and got recruited by Henderson & Associates straight out of school. Brandon? He bounced around from job to job for years. Started out working construction, got fired for showing up late, then he tried sales, got fired for arguing with a customer, then he tried being a car mechanic, got fired for, you guessed it, getting into a fight with a coworker. Eventually, he started his own roofing company because nobody else would hire him anymore. And my parents treated it like he'd just founded the next Fortune 500 company. They threw him this massive party when he got his business license. Invited the whole family. Had a banner made. Bought a cake. The works. When I made partner at Henderson, which is a way bigger deal, I got a text that said, "That's nice, honey. We're proud of you." That was it. No party. No celebration. Just a generic text message that felt like it was copied and pasted from some template. I tried not to let it bother me. I really did. I built my own life, focused on my career, got married to an amazing woman named Catherine, and had Ethan. Catherine and I divorced when Ethan was 5, but it was amicable. We co-parent really well. She lives about 20 minutes away, and Ethan splits his time between our houses. The divorce had nothing to do with my family, by the way. Catherine and I just wanted different things in life. She wanted to travel, see the world, have adventures. I wanted stability and routine. We parted as friends, and we both love Ethan more than anything. So yeah, there was already tension with my family. But things really escalated when Brandon married Jessica about 8 years ago. Jessica is sweet. Too sweet for Brandon, honestly. She's one of those genuinely kind people who sees the best in everyone, even when there's nothing good to see. She's a nurse at a local hospital, works night shifts, completely holds their household together while Brandon's business circles the drain. They had twin daughters together about 6 years ago. Beautiful little girls, Maya and Sophie. And Jessica's mom, Mrs. Rosa, moved in with them about a year after the twins were born to help out. Mrs. Rosa was probably in her mid-60s, spoke English with a heavy Spanish accent, and was one of those kind, quiet women who just wanted to help her daughter and be useful to her family. She'd cook these amazing Mexican meals from scratch. She'd clean the house. She'd watch the twins when Jessica was working her night shifts at the hospital. She was basically holding that entire household together while Brandon's business was falling apart and Jessica was working herself to death. And Brandon hated her, absolutely despised her. He'd complain constantly at family gatherings about how she was always there, how she was a burden on his finances, how she was eating his food and taking up space in his house. Never mind that she was doing thousands of dollars worth of unpaid childcare and housework. Never mind that without her, Brandon and Jessica would have had to pay for a nanny and a housekeeper, which they absolutely could not afford. He'd call her names right to her face, told her she was useless, told her she should go back to Mexico, even though Mrs. Rosa was born in Texas and had never even been to Mexico. He'd make cruel jokes at her expense during family dinners, and my parents would just laugh it off. That's just Brandon being honest. That's just Brandon's sense of humor. You're too sensitive, Tyler, if you think that's mean. I tried calling him out on it multiple times. At my dad's 58th birthday party 2 years before the incident, Brandon made this joke about Mrs. Rosa being too old to be useful anymore. I told him right there in front of everyone that he was being disrespectful and cruel. My mom pulled me aside and said, "Why are you always starting drama, Tyler? Can't you just let things go? Your brother works hard. He's allowed to blow off steam. Blow off steam by verbally abusing an elderly woman who's helping raise his kids for free." Sure, Mom. That makes sense. After that, I started distancing myself from family events. It just wasn't worth the headache of watching Brandon be a piece of garbage while everyone praised him for it. I'd show up for the big holidays because my son Ethan loved seeing his cousins, but I'd keep it short. Show up, eat some food, exchange pleasantries, and leave before Brandon inevitably started something. But then came my dad's 60th birthday. That's a big milestone. My mom, Helen, had been planning this party for months. She rented a tent for the backyard, hired a catering company, sent out formal invitations to what felt like half of Austin. She made it very clear that everyone had to be there. No excuses. Family is family, Tyler. Your father is turning 60. You need to be there to celebrate with him. This is important. So I showed up. I brought Ethan with me because it was my weekend with him. He was 9 years old at the time, had just finished 3rd grade. He's the kind of kid who makes you proud just by existing, you know what I mean? He's thoughtful. He's careful. He reads books about animals and space. He still believes in being kind even when people don't deserve it. I raised him to stand up for what's right, to protect people who can't protect themselves, to speak up when he sees something wrong. Those were the values I tried to instill in him, because those were the values I wished my parents had instilled in me, instead of teaching me that being related to someone means you have to tolerate their abuse. Looking back now, I should have known better. Should have seen the warning signs. Should have kept Ethan away from that party. But hindsight's 20/20, right? And I genuinely thought Brandon wouldn't start anything at our dad's birthday party. I thought even he had enough sense to behave for one afternoon. I was wrong. So wrong. We got to my parents' house around 2 in the afternoon. It was one of those humid Texas summer days where the air feels thick enough to cut with a knife. The second you step outside, you're sweating. The kind of day where you can actually see the heat rising off the pavement. My dad's house is in this nice suburban neighborhood in North Austin. Big houses, manicured lawns, the whole American dream package. My parents bought it 20 years ago, and it's appreciated like crazy, worth probably close to $700,000 now. When we pulled up, the driveway and street were already packed with cars. The whole extended family was there. My mom's sisters, my dad's brother and his family, cousins I hadn't seen in years, neighbors from down the street, people from my parents' church. It looked like one of those picture-perfect family gatherings you see in commercials. String lights hanging in the trees, tables set up with nice tablecloths, My dad at the grill, wearing one of those ridiculous aprons that says something like, King of the Grill. My mom fluttering around, making sure everything was perfect. Ethan was excited. He'd wrapped up this present for his grandfather. Some book about fishing that he'd picked out himself. Ethan's really thoughtful about gifts. He actually listens when people talk about their interests and remembers. My dad had mentioned once, probably 6 months earlier, that he wanted to learn fly fishing when he retired. Ethan remembered, saved up his allowance and bought him a beginner's guide to fly fishing. That's the kind of kid he is. We walked into the backyard, and I immediately started making the rounds. Shaking hands, giving hugs, making small talk. Ethan stuck close to me at first, a little shy around all these relatives he barely knew. But then he spotted Maya and Sophie, his twin cousins, playing on a swing set in the corner of the yard. He asked if he could go play with them, and I said sure. Jessica was sitting nearby, watching them, so I knew he'd be supervised. Everything was fine for the first hour or so. People were eating, drinking sweet tea and lemonade, chatting. My dad was in his element, telling stories about his construction days, playing the patriarch. My mom was showing off the dessert table she'd spent days preparing. It was one of those rare moments where I actually felt like maybe, just maybe, we could be a normal family for an afternoon. Then Brandon arrived, and I knew immediately something was wrong. It was about 3 in the afternoon. Most people had been there for at least an hour already. Brandon pulled up in his beat-up Ford F-150 with the Bennett Brothers roofing logo on the side. The truck had a massive dent in the passenger door that he'd never gotten fixed because he couldn't afford it. He parked half on the curb, half on the street, like he couldn't be bothered to park properly. He got out of the truck, and even from across the yard, I could tell he was in a mood. His walk was off, kind of swaggering but unsteady. His clothes were wrinkled. His hair was a mess. And when he got closer, the smell hit me. He smelled like he'd been at a bar since noon. That sour, unmistakable smell that comes from drinking on an empty stomach. His eyes were bloodshot. His face was flushed. He was sweating more than the heat alone would explain. Behind him, Jessica got out of the passenger side, and my heart sank. She looked terrified. Her face was pale. She was wearing sunglasses even though we were heading into late afternoon, which usually means someone's trying to hide something. She was holding her purse really tight against her body. That defensive posture women get when they're scared. And behind her was Mrs. Rosa, getting out of the back seat of the extended cab. She looked like she wanted to disappear. I caught Jessica's eye across the yard. She gave me this look, this pleading, apologetic look that said, "I'm sorry. I know this is going to be bad." I wanted to walk over and intercept Brandon before he made it to the main party, but before I could move, he was already shouting. And when I say shouting, I don't mean calling out a greeting. I mean full-on bellowing. "I told you I didn't want her here." His voice cut through all the background noise. All the conversation stopped. All the music seemed to fade. 30 people turned to stare at Brandon, pointing at Mrs. Rosa like she was something disgusting he'd found on the bottom of his shoe. Why can't she take a hint? I'm sick of feeding useless mouths. He was stumbling a little as he walked, confirming what I already suspected. He'd been drinking. A lot. My mom rushed over, trying to calm him down, but in that way where she was more worried about appearances than about actually addressing the problem. "Brandon, sweetheart, not now. It's your father's birthday. Let's just have a nice day, okay?" But Brandon pushed right past her. He was on a roll now. He was on one of his tirades, and nobody was going to stop him once he got started. Jessica was trying to grab his arm, trying to guide him away from the main group. "Brandon, please, not here, not today. We talked about this. You promised you'd behave." But Brandon yanked his arm away from her so hard that she stumbled. "Don't tell me what to do." He snarled at his own wife in front of everyone. Then he turned on Mrs. Rosa, who was standing there, frozen, probably wishing the ground would swallow her up. The things he said to her. I'm not going to repeat all of it because it makes me sick just thinking about it. But he called her every nasty name you can imagine. He said she was a leech sucking his finances dry. He said she was poisoning his daughters against him. He said she should have stayed in whatever dump she crawled out of. He accused her of being a burden, of being worthless, of deliberately making his life harder. None of it was true, not a single word. Mrs. Rosa did nothing but help their family. But Brandon was drunk and angry, and he needed someone to blame for all his failures. My dad had put down his grill tongs and was walking over, but he wasn't moving fast. He wasn't treating this like the emergency it was. He was treating it like a minor inconvenience. "Brandon, son, come on now. Let's not ruin the party. Why don't you go inside and cool off for a minute?" That's all he said. No reprimand. No telling him to stop. Just a gentle suggestion to cool off, like Brandon was a little kid having a temper tantrum. and not a grown man verbally destroying an elderly woman. I was closer now. I'd been moving toward the situation, trying to figure out how to de-escalate without making things worse. Jessica was crying now, quietly, trying to pull Brandon away. Please, please, just stop! But Brandon was in full rage mode. His face was purple. Spit was flying from his mouth as he screamed. He was waving his arms around, getting more and more aggressive. I was about to step in. I was a lawyer. I dealt with hostile people all the time in depositions. I knew how to stay calm, how to use my words to diffuse situations. But before I could say anything, before I could do anything, a small voice cut through all the chaos. Uncle Brandon, that's not nice. You shouldn't talk to Mrs. Rosa like that. She's always nice to me and Maya and Sophie. Why are you being mean? Everything stopped. Everyone turned. And there was Ethan, my 9-year-old son. He'd left the swing set where he'd been playing with his cousins. He'd walked right into the middle of this nightmare. And he'd stepped between Brandon and Mrs. Rosa. He looked so small. So incredibly small next to Brandon, who's about 6'2" and probably 230 pounds of angry drunk man. But Ethan wasn't backing down. His voice was shaking a little bit, but he was standing his ground. Mrs. Rosa is really nice, Ethan continued, looking up at Brandon with these big, earnest eyes. She makes the best tamales, and she always helps Jessica when she's tired from work. You shouldn't say mean things to people who are nice. It's not right. I felt two things at once. An overwhelming surge of pride because my son was doing exactly what I'd taught him, standing up for someone who couldn't defend themselves. And an overwhelming surge of terror because I knew Brandon. I knew his temper. I knew how he reacted when people challenged him. And Ethan had just challenged him in front of 30 witnesses. Brandon's expression changed. It went from general rage to focused fury. He looked down at Ethan with this expression I'd never seen before. This cold, calculated anger. You little punk. His voice was low now. Dangerous. More dangerous than when he was shouting. You think you can talk back to me? You think you're some kind of hero? You think you're better than me because your daddy's some fancy lawyer who makes more money than me? I was moving now. Fast. Crossing the 20 feet between us. My voice came out harder than I intended. Brandon, stop. Right now. He's a child. Back off. But Brandon wasn't looking at me. He was staring at Ethan with this look of pure hatred. He needs to learn his place, Brandon said. Kids these days have no respect. Always think they know everything. Well, I'm going to teach this little punk some manners. That's when he reached down. There was this pile of construction materials near the back fence. My dad had hired Brandon to redo the patio, so there was a bunch of building supplies just sitting there. Bags of concrete, wood planks, and several pieces of steel pipe. 2-foot lengths of galvanized steel pipe used for plumbing or building frames. Heavy, solid, dangerous. Brandon's hand closed around one of them. He picked it up like it weighed nothing. And in that moment, time seemed to slow down. Ethan, move. I screamed it. Full volume. Everyone heard me. Everyone turned to look. But Ethan didn't understand the danger yet. He was just standing there. This brave little kid who thought words could stop violence. He thought if he just explained things right, if he just made Uncle Brandon understand, everything would be okay. That's the kind of innocent worldview 9-year-olds have. They don't yet understand that some people are broken in ways that can't be fixed with reason. Brandon didn't hesitate, didn't threaten first, didn't give any warning. He just swung that steel pipe like a baseball bat, putting his full body weight behind it. He aimed low, going for Ethan's legs. Maybe he thought hitting the legs would somehow be less bad than hitting the head. Or maybe he was just trying to knock my son down. Or maybe he didn't think at all. He was drunk and angry, and Ethan had challenged him, and that was enough. The sound. I'll hear that sound in my nightmares for the rest of my life. It wasn't a thud like when you drop something heavy. It was a crack. A wet, visceral, sickening crack. Like when you snap a chicken bone. Like when a tree branch breaks under too much weight. But louder. So much louder. The pipe connected with Ethan's right shin, just below the knee. The force of it. The physics of a 230-pound man swinging a steel pipe at a 60-pound child. It was devastating. Ethan didn't scream right away. There was this moment. This awful, silent moment where he just looked confused. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened. But no sound came out. He looked down at his leg. Then he looked up at me. And in his eyes, I saw the exact moment that his innocence died. The moment he realized that adults, even family, could hurt you on purpose. Then he collapsed. His leg just folded under him at an angle that legs aren't supposed to fold. Midway between the knee and ankle, there was this bend. This horrible, unnatural bend. Then the scream came. It was the worst sound I've ever heard. Worse than anything I'd heard in any courtroom. Worse than any sound I could have imagined. It was this high-pitched, primal shriek of absolute agony. The kind of scream that comes from pain so intense that the body just takes over and produces this animal sound. My leg. He was screaming over and over. "Daddy, my leg. Daddy, it hurts. Daddy, help me." I hit the ground next to him. My knees slammed into the grass hard enough that I'd have bruises for weeks. But I didn't care. I didn't feel it. All I could see was Ethan. His jeans were already soaking through with blood. Dark red spreading down his leg. And then I saw it. The bone. White bone sticking out through the skin, through the denim. A compound fracture. The tibia had snapped clean through and punched out through the flesh. There was blood everywhere. On the grass. On Ethan. On me. "Don't move, buddy. Don't move." I was crying. Fully sobbing. My hands were hovering over his leg. But I was terrified to touch him. Every first aid course tells you not to move someone with a broken bone. Don't move them. Don't touch them. Wait for professionals. But every instinct I had was screaming to do something. Fix it. Make it better. But I couldn't. I couldn't do anything except kneel there next to my son while he screamed in pain. I looked up. I don't know why. Maybe looking for help. Maybe looking for answers. Maybe just needing to see someone, anyone, react appropriately to this horror. And I saw Brandon. He was still holding the pipe. His chest was heaving. He was breathing hard like he'd just run a sprint. But he wasn't horrified. He wasn't shocked at what he'd done. He looked satisfied. He looked vindicated. Like he'd won something. Like teaching a 9-year-old a lesson about respect was worth shattering his leg. That'll teach you. Brandon said it loud enough for everyone to hear. That's what happens when you disrespect your elders. That's what happens when kids get too mouthy. I stood up. I don't remember deciding to stand up. My body just moved on its own. I was going to kill him. Right there. In front of everyone. I was going to take that pipe out of his hand and beat him to death with it. I didn't care about the law. Didn't care about jail. Didn't care about anything except making him hurt the way my son was hurting. But before I could take a step, hands grabbed me from behind. Strong hands. My father's hands. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me back. "Tyler, calm down." He was yelling in my ear. "Don't make this worse. Don't make a scene here. Let me go." I was roaring, struggling against him. My father's got about 30 pounds on me, and he was using all of it to keep me restrained. He just broke Ethan's leg. "Let me go. Look at him. Look at what he did." My mother appeared. She stepped right past Ethan, who was still on the ground, still screaming, still bleeding. She stepped over him like he was a piece of furniture. She walked over to Brandon, who was still holding that pipe, and she stood between us, protecting Brandon, actually physically positioning herself to protect the man who'd just attacked a child. Then she looked at me. Her face was calm, not shocked, not horrified, just calm and disapproving. Like I was being dramatic, like this was somehow my fault. "You've always been too soft on that boy, Tyler." Her voice was steady, matter of fact. "That's why he's so disrespectful. He needs to learn not to interfere in adult matters. This is partly your fault for not disciplining him properly." I couldn't process it, couldn't understand what I was hearing. My son's bone was sticking out of his leg. There was blood pooling on my parents' perfectly manicured lawn, and my mother was blaming me for not disciplining him. My father was nodding along, still holding me back, still restraining me like I was the problem. "It was just a tap, Tyler." My dad actually said this out loud where people could hear. Brandon lost his temper. The boy provoked him. "This is family business. We don't need to involve outsiders. We can handle this ourselves. Just a tap." My son's shin bone was broken in half, protruding through his skin, and my father called it a tap. That's when something inside me died. Some part of me that still believed my parents were good people who'd made mistakes. Some part of me that thought maybe they'd see sense. Maybe they'd protect their grandson. Maybe they'd do the right thing. That part died right there in that backyard. And something else took its place. Something cold and calculating and absolutely ruthless. I pulled my phone out. "What are you doing?" Brandon sneered. "You going to call the cops on your own brother?" I didn't answer. I snapped a photo of Ethan's leg. Then another. Then a video of him crying. The bone clearly visible. Brandon lunged at me, trying to grab my phone. But Jessica's uncle stepped between us. Someone had already called 911. I could hear sirens in the distance. When the ambulance arrived, the EMTs took one look at Ethan and immediately got him on a stretcher. They told me it was a severe compound fracture, that he needed surgery immediately. I rode with him in the ambulance. At the hospital, while they were prepping Ethan for surgery, a police officer came to take my statement. I showed him the photos, the video, and the names of 30 witnesses who saw the whole thing. The officer's face went hard when he saw the evidence. "Your son's 9 years old? Yes. And your brother hit him with a steel pipe? Yes. Over words? Over my son defending an elderly woman from verbal abuse. The officer nodded slowly. We'll be arresting your brother. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? I do, I said. And I'm filing charges. Maximum charges. That evening, after Ethan was in surgery, my phone started blowing up. My mother. Tyler, please. Brandon didn't mean to hurt him that badly. You can't press charges. He's your brother. My father. You're tearing this family apart over an accident. Brandon just lost his temper. You're overreacting. Brandon's wife, Jessica. Please, Tyler. He's already been arrested. Don't make this worse. Think about the twins. I blocked all of them. Every single one. Then I sat in that hospital room and made a decision. I was going to destroy Brandon. Completely and utterly. And if my parents wanted to protect him, I'd destroy them too. The surgery took 6 hours. They had to insert a metal rod to hold the bone together. The doctor told me Ethan would need months of physical therapy, might walk with a limp for the rest of his life, and would definitely have chronic pain. All from his uncle. All because he stood up for someone being bullied. When Ethan finally woke up, groggy from anesthesia, the first thing he said was, "Dad, is Mrs. Rosa okay?" That broke me. My son, lying there with a metal rod in his leg, was worried about someone else. The next morning, I went to the best criminal prosecutor in the county. I brought the photos, the video, witness statements from the neighbors who'd seen everything. I want him charged with aggravated assault on a minor, I said. Maximum penalty. The prosecutor looked at the evidence. This is pretty clear cut. Your brother's looking at serious time. Good, I said. Make sure of it. Then I went to a civil attorney. I want to sue him for everything. Medical bills, pain and suffering, future medical costs, emotional trauma, everything. The attorney whistled low. That's going to be a lot of zeros. I know, I said, and I want every single one of them. But I wasn't done. I'm a lawyer, remember? I know how to dig. I started investigating Brandon's roofing company. Something about it had always seemed off. Within a week, I found what I was looking for. Brandon had been running his business illegally for years. No proper licensing, no insurance, cutting corners on safety regulations. He'd been underpaying workers, misclassifying employees as contractors to dodge taxes, and there were dozens of complaints from customers about shoddy work. I reported everything to the state licensing board, the IRS, and the Department of Labor. The criminal case moved fast. 30 witnesses, video evidence, a 9-year-old victim with a compound fracture. The prosecutor didn't even offer a plea deal. She wanted to make an example of Brandon. During the trial, I sat in that courtroom every single day and watched Brandon's defense crumble. His lawyer tried to argue that Ethan provoked him, that it was just a momentary lapse in judgment, that Brandon was under financial stress. The prosecutor put Ethan on the stand. They let him use crutches to walk to the witness box. He was wearing shorts, and everyone could see the surgical scars on his leg. The prosecutor asked him to describe what happened. Ethan, being the honest kid he is, told the whole truth. I saw Uncle Brandon yelling at Mrs. Rosa. He was calling her bad names. Mrs. Rosa looked scared. I just wanted him to stop being mean. I didn't think he'd hurt me. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Brandon got 8 years. Could have been more, but the judge gave him credit for being a first-time violent offender. I didn't care. 8 years was enough. While the criminal case was ongoing, the civil suit was moving forward. Brandon's roofing company collapsed after the state licensing board revoked his license. Turns out, most of his contracts were invalid because he wasn't properly licensed. Customers started demanding refunds. Workers started suing for unpaid wages. The IRS hit him with a massive tax bill for all those misclassified employees. By the time the civil trial started, Brandon was already financially destroyed. But I wasn't suing Brandon. I was suing my parents too. See that pile of construction materials Brandon grabbed the pipe from? That was on my parents' property. They knew Brandon had anger issues. They knew he'd been drinking. They knew there were dangerous materials easily accessible. And they did nothing. The legal term is negligent supervision. My parents created an unsafe environment that directly led to my son's injury. My lawyer argued that they were liable for damages. My parents hired a lawyer who tried to argue family immunity. That's this old legal doctrine that says family members can't sue each other. But that doctrine doesn't apply in cases of intentional harm or gross negligence. We had Brandon's history. The times he'd gotten into bar fights. The times he'd threatened people. The times my parents had bailed him out. We showed that my parents knew Brandon was dangerous, knew he was unstable, and chose to enable him anyway. The jury awarded us $1.4 million. Brandon was on the hook for $800,000. My parents were on the hook for $600,000. None of them had that kind of money. Brandon was in prison. My parents had to sell their house to pay the judgment. That beautiful house in Austin, with the big backyard where Brandon shattered my son's leg. Gone. They had to move into a tiny apartment in a bad part of town. But I still wasn't done. I went after Brandon's assets. He didn't have much, but what he did have, I took. His truck, his tools, his equipment. I sold it all and put the money toward Ethan's medical fund. I also went after my parents' retirement accounts. Texas law protects some retirement money from judgments, but not all of it. I took every cent I legally could. My extended family tried to intervene. Cousins calling me, telling me I was being cruel. Aunts and uncles saying I was destroying the family over an accident. I told them all the same thing. When you enable abuse, you're complicit in it. When you protect an abuser, you become one. I don't care if you think I'm cruel. I care about protecting my son. Most of them stopped talking to me. Fine by me. Jessica, Brandon's wife, reached out privately. She told me she was divorcing Brandon. She said she'd been terrified of him for years, but was too scared to leave. She said watching him attack a child made her realize she had to protect her daughters. I helped her find a good divorce attorney, pro bono. She got sole custody of the twins. Brandon won't see them again until they're adults, if they even want to see him. Mrs. Rosa was able to stay with Jessica and the girls. She's still helping raise them, but now she does it in peace without Brandon terrorizing her. 2 years after the trial, I got a call from the prosecutor. She told me Brandon had been stabbed in prison. Some fight in the yard. He survived, but barely. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to speak at his parole hearing when the time came. I told her I'd be there, and I'd make sure he served every single day of his sentence. She laughed and said she figured as much. My parents called me once during those 2 years. They needed money. The apartment they'd moved into had a rent increase they couldn't afford. They were struggling to make ends meet. My dad had to come out of retirement to work part-time at a hardware store. My mom was working at a grocery store. They wanted me to help them. Just a little financial support until they got back on their feet. I met them at a coffee shop. I wanted to see their faces when I said no. They looked old, tired, worn down by life. My dad started with the usual. Tyler, we're family. Family helps each other. We made a mistake, but you can't punish us forever. Your mother and I raised you. We gave you everything. You owe us. I let him finish. Then I pulled out a folder. Inside was a printout of every text message, every voicemail, every email they'd sent me defending Brandon. Every time they minimized what he did. Every time they said Ethan deserved it. Every time they called me cruel for pressing charges. I laid it out on the table between us. You didn't make a mistake, I said, my voice calm and cold. You made a choice. You chose to defend the man who shattered your grandson's leg. You chose to blame a 9-year-old child for being attacked. You chose Brandon over Ethan, over me, over basic human decency. My mother started crying. Tyler, please. We're sorry. We didn't know it would get this bad. You knew, I said. You knew when you held me back while my son was screaming in pain. You knew when you said he deserved it. You knew when you hired lawyers to fight me instead of just admitting you were wrong. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it. My dad's face went red. So you're just going to let your parents suffer? You're going to abandon us? I'm not abandoning you, I said. I'm just treating you the way you treated me and Ethan. I'm choosing someone else over you. I'm choosing my son. My mom was sobbing now. Please, Tyler. We have nowhere else to go. Figure it out, I said, standing up. You're adults. You're resourceful. You'll survive. That's what you told me when I asked for help with Ethan's medical bills before the lawsuit. Remember? You said we'd figure it out. So figure it out. I walked out of that coffee shop and never looked back. I don't feel guilty about it. Not even a little bit. Because every time I think maybe I was too harsh, I look at Ethan. He's 11 now. He walks with a slight limp. He gets pain in his leg when it rains. He'll have that scar for the rest of his life. A permanent reminder that his uncle attacked him, and his grandparents said he deserved it. But you know what? Ethan's doing okay. Better than okay, actually. He's in therapy, not because I forced him, but because he asked for it. He wanted to talk to someone about what happened. He's got friends, he's doing well in school, and he's still the kindest kid you'll ever meet. He volunteers at an animal shelter on weekends. He tutors younger kids who are struggling with math. He's everything a father could hope for. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.